Welcome everyone to Higher Moment Mastermind. I'm Sheila Letzar and joined by Vern Challenger. Happy to help you this Friday morning with your job search journey. We are here to answer any question that you like, um, anything on your heart and mind, resumes, interviewing, networking, whatever you'd like to ask us. I am a recruiter and a career coach. Vern is a former HR executive and a career coach. And so we have a kind of a wide perspective of views and lenses and perspectives on the job search journey. So Rebecca or Monique, would you like to kick us off with a question?
Hi, I'm in content marketing, and I was just wondering if maybe there are some skills that marketer or content marketers should be looking to add to their skill set for this year.
That's a great question. It's a pretty specific question. I mean, I know a bit about content marketing. Neither Vern or I are experts in that area. We're experts more on the job search in general. So I'm not sure I can specifically answer that. Can you be a little bit more specific
Sure,
around?
I
Yeah.
can zoom out there. What are some skills that employers are looking for that maybe not every applicant that has that could help job seekers be more competitive, I guess.
Yeah. So again, not sure if I can specifically address content marketing, right? Because there are a lot of
Oh,
different
exactly.
roles, right? I
Just
don't know. Yeah, I mean, I would say AI. I mean, obviously AI is, like the thing that everybody's looking for. But is it is it specifically content marketing that you're asking about, or are you asking in general what employers are looking for
well,
to be competitive?
for the sake of your audience, I would
Mhm.
say we could just make that a general thing rather
General.
than specific to content
Yeah.
marketing.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll say this. Of course, we don't know in the coming year, right, what anybody's specifically going to be looking for. What I will say is that increasingly employers are very risk averse, and we say that a lot on this call. And what I mean by that is that they don't want to take a risk in the hire. Okay. Hiring it's a business decision for them, right? They have a business need and they are looking for people who can help advance that business need. And as a result, they take their time to make sure that when they evaluate candidates, every little thing lines up as much as possible. So one of the things that we talk about on this call is that when you are applying for roles, you need to make sure as much as possible that you are tailoring not only your resume, but your interviews very, very, very specifically to that opportunity, because that's how they're vetting you, right? You've got a lot of competitors, other people who've sent their resume in, they have one opportunity and they're saying, okay, to what extent do these specific people fit this specific opportunity? You may have a resume that has a bunch of eclectic, wonderful skills, but your job is to take the most relevant skills, competencies, experiences, industry related experience even, and say, okay, for that particular opportunity, I want to really showcase how I can make a measurable impact, how I've done that in the past and how I can do that in the future. And to the extent that you can kind of line everything up, that's the extent to which they're going to think, oh, wow, Rebecca's really, really a good fit. If by contrast, your the kind of things that you bring up are a little bit generic or maybe not quite on target, they're not going to feel it as much, right? So that is an opportunity that you have to be extremely tailored in what you do. Now, I've got a lot of advice, but that's I think one of the main ones that I'd want to focus on. Vern, want
Yeah,
to
let me
that?
jump in. And Chair and I talk, and Elke, we talk all the time about networking and how important it is to your job search. So this is just another example. One of the things I'd recommend is, Rebecca, that you talk to other people in your profession. Is there a marketing association type group in
Like an,
Austin?
I don't
Which
know
I'm
if
guessing,
AMA has a
yeah, I'm
local
guessing there
chapter
has to
that
be in
where you can
Austin.
be content marketers. Yeah.
Yeah, and just, if you went to a networking event with content marketers, say, what are you looking forward to in this next year? What are the skills you're concentrating on? What have you heard that are the up and coming skills that people need to be really successful in content marketing? And people, I'm sure, would be happy to share with you whatever their thoughts are around that. And the more people you talk to, around that, the greater likelihood you're gonna start to see, I'm hearing this same thing over and over and over again. which then that pretty much tells you that's a skill or a competency that you really need to focus on.
Yeah, highly agree with that. And not only for the sake of highlighting which skills, but also it increases your ability to even get interviewed, right? To find opportunities and to get people to refer you into those opportunities. We always talk about that too here is the power of the network. And it's really about who you know. I mean, it's an old expression, but it's a true expression, especially these days. When you can get referred in to an organization, it is much more impactful than anything you can do around just applying to a job online. When you apply to a job online, you are quite literally competing with hundreds of other people, sometimes even thousands. And so your ability, the chances of you being seen and noticed is very slim. When you have somebody who can directly refer you in, directly refer you to the hiring manager, to the HR person, even to a senior executive, and sort of flag your candidacy, right? Airlift you out of the pile of hundreds and take notice of you, it's tremendously helpful. And so if you can kind of find your content marketing fish pond, Monique found us today through Meetup. Well, Meetup, of course, has lots and lots of meetings. So I would encourage you, Rebecca, if you haven't yet done this, look on Meetup, right? There might be some content marketing Meetup groups, right, where you can meet the folks who do what you do. Because frankly, those are your very best referral sources. They are not your competitors. They're your competimates, people who do what you do, because they're going to hear about opportunities that are not right for them, but could be right for you. And I know that as a
Impediment.
recruiter. Do you do that already?
No, I've never heard that word before and I like it.
Competimates,
Impediment.
yeah. Yeah, competimates. And so, and as a recruiter, I will tell you that's actually how we recruit. We go under the competitive concept, meaning we go in and for example, we'll go on LinkedIn, we'll use the search bar. And by the way, you can do this too, to look for yourself, almost be like your own recruiter. But when we recruit, we'll put, so for let's say I'm looking for, let's say I'm searching for a content marketing director or manager or whatever. I would put that phrase into LinkedIn, into the search bar. I would say content marketing manager, content marketing director, hit enter, and then boom, all these people who have that phrase in their headline. P.S. That's what you want to do in your headline. You need to make sure that your title, your aspirational title, is in the first few words of your headline, because that's literally how we're going to find you. That's how LinkedIn's algorithm works. Is whatever search term we put in, if that shows up in the first few words of your profile, boom, you come up on the first, second, third page. And so when we do that, we're presuming that when we see all these content marketers and we start reaching out and say, hey, Rebecca, hey, Sally, hey, Susie, right? I've got this opportunity, says the recruiter. Who do you know that might be a good fit? Because that's how we do it. Rebecca, or no, Sally says, hey, well, the job's not right for me, but it's right for my friend, Rebecca, right? Because presumably birds of a feather, right, flock together. So Rebecca and Sally know each other because you're all hanging out in the same fish pond. We assume that. We assume that because professional communities exist for a reason. Associations, for example, exist for a reason. The American Medical Association, the whatever association, right? They have professional communities, the American Marketing Association, of people who are professionals who hang out together, who share best practices and knowledge. We know that. And so we assume that you all kind of know each other. And so, Rebecca, to the extent that you network, out to Vern's point, you network with those people, you get known by those people. When they hear about opportunities, right, they can be referring them to you. So is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Gina, good to see you. Happy New Year. Haven't seen you in a while. Welcome.
Can I chime in?
Absolutely, yeah. Feel free.
Yeah.
Comment, question?
Yeah. Um, so I have a couple things top of mind, and I appreciate underscoring the networking and getting out there,
Yeah.
which being on this call is always so wonderful. So thank
Good.
you
Yeah, sure.
for being so consistent, and giving us confidence and whatnot. So I think, yeah, top of mind is being comfortable bragging about ourselves, especially as women, and culturally that may not be as a strong muscle as for other groups of folks and whatnot. So I find these calls very helpful. But yeah, if you had any thoughts about that.
Do absolutely do, and I know Vern does for sure.
Um,
He has a phrase that he likes to use. I'd like to give a high level concept here around to maybe help you reframe the whole idea of what you call bragging, right? I'd like to reframe that for a little bit, and then I definitely want to hand this over to Vern because he has a lot to say about this topic, a lot of great things. Here's my reframe. Your job search is not about you. Okay, it's about both of you. The organization has a business need, and you have superpowers that can help them fill that business need. It is an equal relationship. Therefore, whenever you're out there networking, interviewing, anytime you're talking about yourself, all you are doing is letting the world know how you can use your divinely gifted superpowers to help people solve their business challenges. That's your job, period. It's not personal. I mean, truly, it's not. It may feel personal. You got to put food on the table and the whole thing, right? But at the end of the day, it's a business arrangement. They have a need. You can solve that need. I'm in business for myself. Vern is in business for himself. We do this all the time. If we did not share with people what we did and how we could solve their problems, no one would ever be able to benefit from our services, right? Which means we have to be out there kindly sharing with people, hey, I do this, I do that. If you ever know of anybody who has a need for this and that, right? If we didn't do it, it wouldn't happen. I just want to give you a very quick example of that. I hope I never forget this example because it was really interesting. It was a few years ago, and I was talking to an employer client. I work with both job seekers, I work with employers, I do a lot of stuff. But anyway, I was talking to an employer. His name is David. He was a chief operating officer at a small firm. That firm for years has and still does uses me for something called outplacement. Outplacement is when an employer has to unfortunately downsize some people. They will then pay for a career coach to coach the downsized person, right? They pay for that. That's part of the severance package. Okay. So this firm had been using me just for that for years. Well, apparently they thought that's all I did. They didn't know. Why? Because I had never told them I did anything else. So one day I'm talking to David, just a quick little conversation, and he's talking about his staff and blah, blah, just problems, right? And I just very casually said, oh, by the way, David, I'm like, well, I'm a recruiter and I'm a coach. He goes, an executive coach. He goes, wait, you're what? I mean, he like jokingly, but not so jokingly started to yell at me. He's like, Shira, how could you have been hiding this from me? Do you mean this whole time I could have been working with you and you could have been helping me solve these other kind of staffing problems and you never told me? I was like, oh my gosh. I didn't want to oversell myself, but he felt like he was denied the blessing, right, of having somebody who he trusted to help him solve some other needs. And sure enough, at the end of that call, he gave me someone to do executive coaching with right there in his staff who needed some leadership development. And he was grateful that we had the conversation. So Gina, my point is, had I not said anything, he would not have had a trusted colleague to help him solve his business problem. It's the same with you. If you don't speak up, if you don't let people know the wonderful ways you can help them, they won't be able to use you to help them solve the problems, right? Does that make sense? I want to really reframe it here because it really is about you sharing the ways in which you can help people. Does that make sense? So I want to give Vern an opportunity because he has a whole concept around networking and like how to frame that. So hopefully you can get some more goodness from him too.
Yeah, so much like Shira said, let me reframe how you think about networking. Contacts count has a basic foundational principle that networking is not about talking and taking, it's about teaching and giving. So every conversation you have with anyone, anywhere, any place, you have an opportunity to teach them something about yourself. And you have an opportunity to learn something about them. And the more you teach others about who you are and the more you learn about them, the greater likelihood they can help you in some way, and then you can help them in some way. It might be a small gesture, it might be a large gesture, it may happen immediately and right in the conversation, it may be a week later, it may be 2 weeks later. But if you think of networking simply as opportunities to teach and give others, give back to others, then that does a couple of things. It does exactly what Shira says. You're communicating to them, who you are and what you're all about. Now, it doesn't all happen in the first conversation, but over time, the more conversations you have, the more people learn about you. So the first opportunity that anyone has to teach someone about themselves is when you get the infamous question, what do you do?
Yeah. Mhm.
Right?
Tell me
Everybody
about
gets that,
yourself.
right? And most people answer that question. So if I answer that in a typical way, I would say I'm the president and CEO of Contacts Count. I give my title, I give my company. I'm a lawyer, I'm an attorney, I work in cybersecurity, some form of the profession, the industry, the title of the person. Two problems with that answer. One, they don't answer the question. The question is, what do you do? Okay. And the second problem is you've missed the opportunity to teach somebody almost immediately about something about you. And so one way at Contacts Counter, we teach people to answer that question is to create basically two sentences. It's short and it's sweet. Okay. You don't want a 5 minute, speech about who you are and what you're all about. So rather than say I'm president and CEO of Contacts Count, I would say something like I teach people. So if you ask me, what do? I teach people the skills and behaviors to build trust-based, mutually beneficial relationships. I just recently worked with a cohort coaching program where they said the program literally changed their lives. So the first sentence is something you do well, something you're good at. And the second example is a sentence that gives a short example of you using those skills to have a positive outcome. Okay. So, and so much like you said, Gina, when we work with individuals or teams or doing presentations, people say, oh my God, that sounds like boasting. I could never say that. And our answer to it is exactly what Shira just said. If you don't communicate to others who you
know.
are, how in the world are they going to help you? How are they in the world are they going to know what you do, what you're good at? So if they come across an opportunity, they can say, "Oh wow, this sounds like something Gina would be, interested in, or potentially this is a job she might want." And so the more conversations you have, the greater likelihood someone, someplace is gonna refer you to an opportunity that you may not have even found yourself.
So when you're thinking about how to share your accomplishments, right? Think about it from the perspective of how can I teach this person um, about something I've done that could be meaningful to them? Because again, it's not about you. It's not about bragging, right? And it's certainly not about the humble brag that people like to do these days. It's not about that. It really is saying, you know what, I helped this organization solve this kind of problem, which sounds like it could be related to the kind of problems that you are having in your organization. So again, I'll go back to me and Vern for in our businesses, right? So Vern has a specialty thing that he mostly does, right? He does career coaching, he does networking, right? I tend to have a few more lanes to my highway, right? So for somebody like me in particular, if I'm talking to someone else, I've got to be very targeted in how I share about what I do. Because what I share, what I do, different things of what I do might relate to different people in different ways. So if I'm talking to an employer who wants to consider me to do a recruitment assignment, a search, I'm not going to launch into the career coaching work that I do. That would be completely irrelevant, right? And likewise, a career coaching prospect, I'm not going to talk about recruiting work. Same thing. And Vern isn't necessarily going to launch into all his amazing HR executive work that he used to do if it's not relevant to the law firm or law school that he's working with who needs to help with their networking with their students. Okay. It's the same thing with you. You've got to be targeted when you have to think about who is your audience that's right in front of you. What do they do? Why are they speaking with you? What might they need to hear from you that would be helpful for them uniquely to know about the problems you've solved that are related to the problems they need you to solve? Or if it's somebody in your network that isn't an employer, let's say, but they're part of your professional community, again, what elements, how do you want to frame it in a way they can hear it? I'm going to go one more level deeper, and that has to do with jargon. Okay. So we're a very jargony kind of country, right? Right? Every industry, every profession has we talk in acronyms, or we say all the stuff, right? That if we say it in a very jargony kind of a way, only the people who do what we do will understand. And as you kind of step away from that, if you look kind of rings of a bullseye, like the bullseye people are our people, right? They're our competitive mates, the people who do what we do. But as you start to step away, the people will have less and less of an understanding. My next door neighbor, who's an IT guy, he's not going to understand what I do in the association world. So I shouldn't be talking in association jargon with him. Okay. But if I were in IT, I could dog jargon all day long. And it's the same thing with you, right? When you're chatting with people, think not only what do I want to communicate, how do I want to communicate in a way they can understand? And if they're a little bit removed from what I do or the industry that I do it for, I might have to genericize it a little bit, right? So I have this little a slide deck I won't show right now, but I talk about this networking thing, and I give this little example of a person who is a marketer, and they work for they market within environmental nonprofits, right? And so if they're talking to somebody in their world, they might talk jargony. They might talk about MarTech stacks, and they might talk about WWF. Well, what's WWF? It's the World Wildlife Fund, but only somebody in the environmental nonprofit would know WWF, or somebody in marketing would know MarTech stacks. But you genericize it when you're not talking to that person, working with marketing technology or the World Wildlife, whatever. And so you think about how do you be jargony. If it is it's actually very appropriate to kind of like say that the lingo. But if not, right, you have to make sure that people can understand, they can hear what you're saying in a way that's meaningful to them. Does that make sense? Is that
Yeah,
all?
the other place where, again, obviously you want to communicate your expertise is in the interview.
Mhm.
And there you can be pretty specific, because if you
You
get to
should
the
be.
point
Yeah.
of getting the interview,
Mhm.
you've had the one measure of the job search process. How many interviews can I get? The more interviews you get, the greater likelihood you're going to land a job. And so again, that's a story. And to Shira's point, you make that story specific to their needs. Hopefully, that through the interviewing process and the research you've done, and you give them an example of when you used your skills to solve exactly the type of problem that they're dealing with, or why you have the skills and expertise to succeed in this position. They walk away saying this person looks like a great fit for this position.
Is that helpful, Gina?
Yeah, and it answers my second question, which was, if I'm so seasoned as a nonprofit fundraiser and I'm getting the interviews, but it's been hard for me to get the interviews in non-fundraising,
That's right.
not profit. So what you guys just talked about
That's right.
is helping me to stretch in how I don't use the fundraising jargon.
Mhm.
But to be more broad in terms of the skills that I've developed and the problems that I've solved that could be relevant in other functions or in other lanes or
Yeah.
communities,
So
as you
yeah.
talked
So
about.
yeah. If that's okay, I'd like to springboard off of that, if that's all right. Because what you're referring to here is what we kind of call the career changer, or some sort of career pivot, which going back to this whole idea of risk aversion, employers are risk averse, right? So they love to have, in a perfect world, usually they like to have people who've been there, done that, have a couple t-shirts and a side of coleslaw, right? Why? Because from their lens, that's a lighter learning curve. And nobody has time to train anymore. They want you to come in, slide in, and be able to do the job yesterday, make immediate results. Generally speaking, that's the mindset. And so every time we, again, step away from that a little bit, we have to make a better and better case to the employer that, yes, indeed, I will have a lighter learning curve than you think I will, because I have these transferable skills. And your opportunity then is to make that case. You got to make that case, which also means not only being able to speak in the language that they can hear, but be able to speak specifically to the kinds of stories. In fact, I'm going to give you a hot off the press one. Yesterday, Yesterday I was, because I, as a career coach, I also am a resume writer and I write LinkedIn profiles. So yesterday I was working with someone on her resume. It's fascinating. Vern, you will appreciate this story. So I was talking to a federal government executive. Okay. She's the chief of a particular division in a scientific agency. That's what I'll say. Okay. Now, here was the interesting story that made me smile, and I had to say something to her. So she's telling me this story about this advisory committee. It was a scientific advisory committee. And Gina, you'll appreciate this too, because you're in the nonprofit world. Scientific advisory committee. And when she started the job, she inherited this group of people, and she was supposed to, help manage this group. And she suddenly realized there was no governance structure. The people in this committee had been there for 20 years, and everybody thought it was like a little, club, and you couldn't get into it and all this stuff. And they were starting to be investigated by a government, investigation agency saying, what's the integrity of this group? And you don't know what's your process for including other people, all this stuff. And she's telling me this whole story. And I stopped her and I said, oh my gosh, I said, Susie Cream Cheese. I said, what you're talking about sounds almost identical to association board management. I said, associations, different sector, deal with this all the time, right? Term limits and governance structures and all these things. I said, you might as well be talking like you're in an association. I said, because she's looking to potentially leave the federal government. I said, interesting. I said, if you do end up, right, leaving, and maybe there is a way that I think she could translate into an association because of what she does. I said, this could be a very interesting, like I was thinking to myself, this could be a very interesting kind of a story. My point is that by calling that out, I was able to help her translate from one sector to another sector in an almost parallel scenario. Does that make sense? And that's what you would want to do. You have to speak in a way people can understand. So for example, in the 501c3 fundraising world, even the term fundraising, what does that mean? We know fundraise, we know develop, we know all the different like term in the galas and the high net worth donors, blah, 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 all the stuff, right? You translate that, for example, into an association, they don't often use, sometimes they use the word fundraising, but even when they use it, they don't mean it in the same way. They mean non-dues revenue generation. Okay, it's raising funds, but they speak about it in a different way, right? And so the point is that you've got to be able to translate the language so that people understand, yes, there's transferability here, but I'm sharing this with you, Mr. Employer, because I want to basically minimize your risk. I want you to know that I do have the skills, but I want to speak it in a way that you can understand. Does that make sense? Cool. Monique, we have not heard from you yet. Do you have any questions for us?
This is another example, Monique. If we don't know who you are and what you do and a little bit about you,
Yeah, I'd love to help
there's no
you.
way we can help you.
No, definitely. Hi. So if I did have a question, it would really be mostly about LinkedIn.
Okay.
That's the platform I use the most. So any suggestions, um, networking on LinkedIn or
We have
even applying to jobs on LinkedIn?
we have lots of comments on both of those things. But before we do, can you help us understand a little bit about how you currently use the platform for both of those things?
So I filled it out, the digital resume portion, and I do have recruiters reaching out to me, but mostly I work from home. A lot of the positions now are, to be back on site. Um, but I'm wondering if there's anything that can be done to make your name kind of at the top of the list when it comes to recruiters
Mhm.
or them selecting you over someone else.
Sure. So there's lots of different layers to that question. But I'm going to harken back to the comment I made a little bit ago when we were talking with Rebecca. This first very, very important tip, and I can't emphasize this enough, and that is making sure that the keywords in the opening part of your headline, in other words, your headline meaning right underneath your picture, that headline, that they directly align with the job title that you're looking for. So if Rebecca's looking for a content marketing director role, you'd put that first three words, content marketing director. Now, I recognize that a lot of people have different kinds of titles, right? It's not an exact science, right? Well, I could do this, I could do that. This is an art and a science, and you got to think it through. Okay. What do you put for those first few words? Because on the flip side, Monique, when the recruiter is using the search bar to find you, that's what they're putting in the search bar, a title specifically. Okay. Now they know that sometimes they themselves might have a funky job title, and they're not going to put the funky one in. They're going to put the generic thing in. So again, if I'm looking for a content marketing person, I might start with just the word content marketer. Okay. I might put director if I want to like narrow down the search a little bit, but the point is that would be the phrase that I would use, whatever that title is. I'm looking for an accountant, or I'm looking for a policy analyst. I'm looking for whatever the title is. You have to basically think like a recruiter. If you were the recruiter looking for someone who does what you do, or what you want to do, what kind of title would you put into the search to find people who do what you do? Those are the first few words that need to be there. I was recently working with a head of IT, okay, whose title is currently like VP of technology, something like that. But actually, what he's looking for is a CIO, Chief Information Officer. So we put that as his title. Now, what's the difference between a CIO and a VP of technology? Not much. It just depends on the organization. They're both kind of head of, right? But what we did was we put CI's Chief Information Officer as the first few words in his headline, okay? Which means that if somebody's looking for a CIO, they're going to put CIO into the search bar, and hopefully he's going to come up, as opposed to him having said technology executive. If I'm a recruiter, I'm not going to put probably not going to put technology executive into the search bar. I'm going to put the title. Okay. And part of the reason why this works so well is because what you may not know, or maybe you stumbled across this, when you first created your LinkedIn profile, if you happened to be employed at the time, you had a title. Okay. What LinkedIn automatically did, what it does, it automatically populates your headline with your job title. So if I'm looking for that top 10, I know that as a recruiter, I know that. And I know that those are the people who are going to come up first. And by the way, those are the gainfully employed people. Not to say that unemployed people shouldn't have a chance for a job. Absolutely. But if you do want that, you want to show up like everyone else. So you've got to have that title, because when we put that title in, that's who's going to show up. And if you have something that's very generic, we're literally not going to see you until page 20, and we may not go to page 20. Put in the title of whatever you think. Now, it could be multiples. It could be, it could be content marketing, or content marketer slash, social media expert, or whatever. You could have other phrases in there that relate to what you do, but just make sure that, again, you start with those titles. I'm harping on this, right? Because from a keyword perspective, being found is one step in the process. Now, a lot of other steps in the process. One of the other major ones we alluded to earlier is networking and having basically somebody be an internal champion for you. Okay. So just applying on the job board. Remember, there's two sides to this with LinkedIn. There's being found, where somebody's looking for you proactively. You don't know that they're looking for you, but they're trying to find you. And then there's you finding others, or you, whether it's using the job board and you're, kind of applying, or whether you are proactively using the search bar to find people in your network. Okay. There's all these sides to it. When you are applying on LinkedIn's job board, which is just a normal job board, you're competing with hundreds of people, and especially for remote jobs. And yes, you're right, Monique, there are a lot more jobs now that are hybrid, but there's still a lot of jobs that are remote. Please know, when you apply to a remote job, you are now competing with almost the entire country, quite literally. It is not uncommon for an employer to have 100 to 200 resumes in the first 24 to 48 hours of the posting. Let that sit with you for just a second. That's quite literal. I'm not exaggerating at all. I've actually literally had it happen to me. So much so that oftentimes we'll shut the job down within a few days, because we're just overwhelmed with candidates. And so if you want to get noticed for any job posting on LinkedIn or Indeed or CareerBuilder or anything, you really, really want to try to find an internal champion. And the way you do that is you put the name of the organization in the search bar, hit enter, and then you come up with a list of the people who work there. Look for people who are if you have a first level, that's amazing, but if hopefully a second level contact there. And it's that hopefully the second level is either the C-suite person, HR person, or recruiter, or maybe a colleague who's in, that department. And you want to leverage your mutual first level connection to have somebody be your internal champion. Now, you may or may not have a relationship with that person, but you can at least say, hey, Susie, would you feel comfortable forwarding my resume to Tom? You're the hiring manager. Would you feel comfortable forwarding my resume for extra consideration? Now, you're not necessarily asking them to recommend you, because if they don't know you very well, or if they haven't worked with you yet, they can't recommend you, but they could simply forward along your resume, again, for extra consideration, just so that somebody's airlifting your resume out of the pile. Okay, so this whole idea of doing what I'll call deep sea fishing, deep sea fishing into the company's contacts on LinkedIn can be helpful, because that can help get you noticed. So those are two tips that I would recommend. Monique, is that helpful?
Definitely. Thank you.
You're welcome. Vern, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you covered it all. Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, all these different ways to do it, but at the end of the day, it is about relationships, and it is about getting noticed, but not only getting noticed, but getting noticed by the people who are right for you, where you can specifically help their problem. So always have that lens, that business lens that we talked about earlier. It is a business relationship. Somebody is out there who has a specific need that you can hopefully help them solve, but you got to go figure out who those people are, find those people, market yourself in a way that they can hear, whether that's the phrase on LinkedIn that's going to be the initial keyword that they use to find you, whether you're networking with somebody and you want to share with people what you do, but share it in a way so that they can refer you well, or whether you're in the interview and you tailor your experience and your skills to solve their specific needs.
Can I ask a follow-up question
Mhm.
on that topic? So let's say they've got a couple of candidates they're looking at, and they're looking at their LinkedIn profile to decide who they want to interview. So as they're scanning down the page,
Yeah.
what are like the top things they're looking for when they're comparing people?
So when they're looking at your LinkedIn profile, are you talking about before they've even decided to interview, or after you've already gotten the interview?
Right. They've done the keyword search, content, whatever your title is, and then they say, okay, well, this person
Yeah,
is a possible, and
right.
then I'm assuming that they're looking for specific
Yeah.
things down the page on
Yeah,
your profile.
yeah. Again, so you're just saying when they're just doing their quick scan, you don't even know that they're looking at you, right? They're doing all this behind the scenes, that part of it. So yeah.
Right, like why they're looking at you. You got a notification, but you're not sure why they were there in the first place.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me address that piece first before I address like what they're doing on the page. This is so funny. Last night and this morning, you're the third person now, 24 hours who's alluded to this, the whole notification or anything. Just know this: when LinkedIn is it's a social media platform. It's a professional social media platform, but it's still a social media platform, which means LinkedIn wants you to think that people have sort of winked at you, if you will. So they will let you know all the time, ooh, 300 people you came up in 300 searches. That doesn't mean anything. All that means is that somebody, could be me, could be you, happened to do a search and you came up as one of the 100,000 people that were in that search. That doesn't mean that they were looking for you. That doesn't mean that they opened your profile. That doesn't mean anything. It just means you literally came up in a search. Okay. So don't even ever worry about that. It's just you came up in a search. Someone's doing research and you came up in the search. But if they actually do get to your profile, they open it up and look at it. Now I'm going to answer that question. So here's kind of how it works. When an employer or recruiter is looking at your profile, their eyeballs will do the following scan. Okay. Scan number 1, headline. Does your headline relate? I'm not just talking about the keywords where they actually found you. I just mean like they're actually on your page now. Do the keywords and the concepts in that headline, does it give them a clue that you are actually appropriate for this role? Not only the skills that you have, whatever you put in your headline, but does it give me the impression that you want to do this kind of job? That your brand, the kind of where you're focused, is focused along the lines of what we need you to do. Because if not, we're going to think, she doesn't want the job. We make assumptions. We have to, because we're vetting hundreds of people. We have to make these quick decisions. Literally don't have time to interview everybody's profile that we look at. We have to vet. So if your headline is in a certain direction, we might assume that you do or do not want this role. So that's the first thing. We'll then jump down to your experience section, because your experience section is your resume, right? And we'll quickly look at the job titles that you've had and the companies you've worked for. Get quick 2-second assessment. Roughly speaking, do I see what I need to see, or am I looking for something very specific, or I'm looking for someone who has this kind of thing? I'll give you an example. So I did a search for an executive for a trade association not that long ago. And in that particular case, that association was in the sort of manufacturing sector, and the kind of issues that this person was going to be working on was sort of in the kind of sustainability kind of world, but also in manufacturing. It was a whole kind of thing. So I had a lens, an eyeball to the kinds of associations that I thought this person should probably come from, so that there would be as much of a match as possible. Not that I wasn't open, I was open, but I also kind of knew my target. So quickly I would look down the page and say, oh, does this person come from these kinds of associations? And those were the people who caught my attention. Now that person on the other side of the profile had no idea I was doing that. But I was looking for, they come from a manufacturing association or association who does whatever. And those are the people who I was looking at. So that's the first thing, the headline. Then we jump down to experience. Then if we like both of those things, then we might go to the about section. Now, I in my own career coaching practice, that's one of the things that I write for people. I try to write very compelling LinkedIn about sections. Why? Because once the person does the headline and then they do the experience, the about section is the tell me about yourself answer. Now they want to go a little deeper. It's the same thing when you're going on Amazon, you're looking for a toaster oven, right? What's the first thing you're going to put into Amazon? Toaster oven. You're not going to put in energy efficient. You might want an energy efficient toaster oven, but if you put in the word energy efficient, you're going to get every appliance under the sun. You start with the macro level taxonomy. Toaster oven. Great. Now I got all the toaster ovens. Oh, do I want 2 slices or 4 slices? That's the next level down. Only then, once I got the 4 slice and it's silver and it's and it's energy. Now what am I going to do? I'm going to read the reviews. I'm going to look at the product specifications. I'm going to do all that stuff. That about section is like the product specifications. It's the tell me more, maybe the reviews. Tell me more about what you do in the world. Tell me more about who you serve, how you serve. A lot of people don't recognize that the about section is a very powerful place to make a statement about who you serve, how you serve, why you serve. Most people, if they put anything at all in the about section, they have like this 3-line little vanilla bio, which is just sort of a recap of your experience section, which doesn't really tell anybody anything. They can look at your experience section and see what you do. But if you really take the time to write something that's thoughtful and compelling, that will actually humanize you to the employer. Because now you're not just a resume. You're not just a picture. You're not just a headline. You're a real person who has real interests and real experience and real passions and real ways that you've made a difference and want to make a difference. Take the time to write a very thoughtful about section, because that can be the distinction between them saying, oh, yeah, she's just sort of generic. Oh, that's really interesting. Maybe I want to put her in my A pile so that I can come back and maybe reach out and interview her. Okay. So it's headline, then the experience section, and then the about section. And oh, by the way, yes, you've got some keywords that are flowing throughout there. And sometimes there's like the skills section. Employer may take a look at that. But I would say those 3 sections in that order is how people do it. Is that helpful?
Yes, it is. I talked to another career coach recently, and she said that I should probably remove my graduation date. So, how much attention are they paying to the education section?
Yeah. Okay. So the education date thing has more to do with age discrimination than anything else. So I would say, not going to ask how old you are, but I'm going to suggest that for folks who graduated more than 20 years ago, it is definitely appropriate to remove your education dates. Again, because you just don't want age to be a factor in somebody vetting your competencies. That's a different answer than how much do they look at education. So looking at education is different than looking at education dates. The dates relates to your age or can relate to your age, but the education itself, that's a different conversation that has more to do with, well, do we require a degree for this role? What kind of degree do we require? And maybe the school, those kinds of things may or may not be relevant. I would say that these days, we're having there are more employers that are focused less on education, and that has to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion, because there is a move a little bit afoot in the country that's saying to employers, hey, if you make a requirement for everybody to have a college degree, you are necessarily screening people out who maybe couldn't afford to get a degree. They're still qualified people, but just financially, economically, they couldn't afford it. And so please don't do that. Please be more inclusive is more the point. And so there are some employers that are kind of picking up on this. In fact, the state of Maryland now has a requirement. If you want to get a state of Maryland job, they're not allowed to put a college degree as a requirement for most jobs. Anyway, so that's a whole other conversation. But I would say generally take your degrees, your years off if it's been more than 20 years. That's my opinion. People will have different opinions around that. Some people might say 15 years. But then as far as the degree itself, it may or may not be relevant to an employer depending upon what they think is important around education.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that, Fern?
No, I mean, as Shira said, why risk the potential that somebody might discriminate against you because of your age, just because you put the dates down there? I mean,
You definitely can. Now, by the way, that is one area where you can remove dates, meaning the education section. You cannot remove dates of you on your experience section. Unlike on your resume, where you can have like a little section at the bottom of your resume, you can call it prior experience, and you can say company title, and you can remove the dates. That's a Word document. LinkedIn doesn't give you that option. So if you ever want to, de-ageify yourself, if you will, and you don't want to go back, let's say you have experience prior to, 20 years ago, you can't remove the dates. You have to put the dates in, which means that if you have to make a decision, if you don't want to show your age as much, then you just can't put those experiences on your LinkedIn, because every time you list a job, you must put the dates. So you have to decide, do I want to put the experience because the experience is very important for me to show, or do I want to protect myself from age discrimination, in which case you'd need to remove the entry altogether.
Well, the other point there on any resume, if you look at the first chronological entry, and it was 10 years ago, that you're not going to get hired today based on the skills and experience you had 10 years ago. So while you may still keep it on your resume, if I'm looking at a resume, and again, as Shira said, I was in HR, I looked at lots of resumes, did lots of recruiting, maybe if, so for instance, at the time that I was doing it, General Electric was the most well-known company in the world. And so if people had been at General Electric, then that meant something to me. Now, if it was 10 years ago, I know they've learned a lot more, and the skills that we needed today are not the skills that, that person really, mastered 10 years ago. But the fact that they were in that culture, they experienced General Electric being a really well-run company. I give them some credit for that when I was looking at the resume, but it wouldn't be the be all and end all of making a decision. That's for sure.
People tend to, Vern's absolutely right. Most employers tend to hire people based upon the last 5 to 10 years of experience.
No.
With that said, this is where that whole career changing thing comes into play, because I meet a lot of people who say, oh, but my relevant experience to the thing I want to do now happened 15 years ago. What do I do with that? When that happens, no, you can't change your LinkedIn experience because your chronology is your chronology. But what you can do is you can use your headline and you can use your about section to make that pivot. And so I'll give you another example of that. So, so years ago, I was coaching somebody. He was a mortgage banker, and he decided he wanted to become a recovering mortgage banker, if you know what I mean. He was like, "Oh, and get out of Dodge." And he decided he wanted to pivot into something absolutely like 180 degrees different. He says, "I want to go into regenerative medicine." I said, "You want to what? With who? What is that?" And he explained to me that regenerative medicine is stem cell therapy that helps help heal it's your own stem cells that they use to help heal orthopedic injuries. Okay. It's a very niche kind of thing. Now, he didn't want to go back at the age of 50 and go become a doctor, but he wanted to get into that field somehow. So we did coaching and we're like, okay, what can he do? Well, I have a concept, and this is hopefully helpful for everybody here when you're doing your own branding. I call it lane versus community. Your lane is what you do. Your community is who you do it for. So your lane is your profession, content marketer, fundraiser, whatever. Your community is the industry, mission, or sector you do it for. So Gina, you do it for the nonprofit world. Rebecca, I don't know what your community is, but let's just say it's commercial real estate. I don't know, whatever the industry is, that's the community. Well, anyway, so we decided to do with this guy, his name is Steve. We said, all right, we're going to keep his lane and shift his community. What do I mean by that? Well, he wanted to go into the new community, regenerative medicine. But as a mortgage banker, he wasn't just a mortgage banker, he was a salesperson. Mortgage bankers are salespeople. So we decided to keep his lane and shift his community. How? We said, we're going to make up a job. We're going to market him to regenerative medicine medical practices so that he could go sell their service to patients. Go make up a job and say, hey, regenerative medicine people, you're a very niche practice. You probably need patients to learn about you, to know that this isn't even a possibility for them. I'm going to go help you do that. We figured out a whole creative way to do it. Changed his LinkedIn profile, called him, to this day, I could show it to you. We called him a regenerative medicine medical ambassador, right? Created a whole profile that explained his passion for the field and how he wants to help, with doctors, patients, and all of these things. We then came up with a marketing plan. He went on his own dime. He went to a regenerative medicine medical conference. He networked with people. He actually already knew a practice, and he just networked his way in, and he came up with a little sales plan. He got a job. Now, he didn't stay with the job because it just wasn't right for him, but he got the job. He literally got a place to hire him because we completely redid his profile, and then he was very proactive in how he was networking. And the point of that is that he didn't even have any of that in his experience. But the headline, the about section, the what he did afterwards, all fell into place. And I'm going to give you one more story around that. Also, years ago, worked with a guy who was an attorney, and he also wanted to become a recovering attorney. And he decided he wanted to become a writer. Well, looked at his resume, pulled out all of his writing experience because attorneys do a lot of writing, recreated his LinkedIn profile as a writer, editor, an about section about his passion for writing and editing and all these things. He ended up getting, now watch, remember Lane and Community? He ended up getting a job as a journalist with a legal trade publication. Stayed within the law world, so the employer was minimized their risk, and they gave him a shot to be a journalist. Well, now all these years later, he's now an English teacher. So he was able to go puddle jump from staying within the law environment, but keeping the lane. And then once he became a journalist, then he could bounce completely out of law and then become an English teacher. Okay. It can happen, but it needs to happen with intention, right? The branding has to be there. And then you have to couple that with your networking to let people know I'm intentionally going after solving these problems for these people in this way.
So with that first example, did he have any experience with doing that? The ambassador guy?
Nope, not at all. Not a lick. We just recreated this profile to, when I say ambassador, like in air quotes, right? Like I'm an ambassador, I'm a connoisseur, right? It was just to say, this is what he aspired to do. We created the about section that spoke to his passion, his interest, his knowledge around it. And then a little call to action at the end saying, if you're a regenerative medicine medical practice and you want some support, right, with boots on the ground, or if you're a patient looking to be referred, here's my email address. And again, that coupled with his intentional networking and right, making sure people knew what he was able to get the job. Yeah, but it was very intentional. It was not a light thing. This wasn't like just, oh, hey, everybody, I'm looking for this work. The LinkedIn profile had to demonstrate his intentionality, his commitment, and his serious commitment to doing this. I think that's one of the points of a LinkedIn profile. People will take you seriously. Whatever you put on that profile, they believe you mean it. So be thoughtful and intentional with what you put in your LinkedIn profile. It matters to people, because they believe that if you're putting this out for the world to see, it must be authentic to you.
Well, how do you go from, one job, but the other federal agency has no jobs at all for your level, and it's only like 5 jobs in the email that they send out for recruiting?
Not quite sure. I mean, I'm guessing that you may not be able to land there. I'm not sure. Can you be more specific?
Um, Basically, I've been watching this certain agency, Department of Labor, and here again, they're on their little recruiting email. There's no jobs, at my level. But like you're saying, maybe that place I can't land at
Yeah.
because there's nothing for me to apply to.
Well, right. You may not be able to, but the federal government's a little interesting because they have to post, every job. So if they don't have an opening, they don't have an opening. With that said, the government is in some ways similar to the private sector in that networking is very important, very important. It is about relationships. It's not just about the job postings. So if you have a very strong interest in that agency, it would serve you very, very well to find some colleagues who can refer you to people at that agency, particularly people who are in positions to hire and start networking your way there, so that if there's something that they're even thinking about, it could be that you are top of mind when the right opening happens, so that you're not late to the game, right? So once an employer, even including an agency, once they post the job, it's a little bit late because now all of a sudden it's out to the whole world. Whereas if you catch it early, while it's still a little twinkling in their eye, then you get considered early and not after 500 people have applied. So at least you can have a better shot of landing it if you're networked well.
Okay. Sounds good. And my mind is just starting to move, like a campaign, a marketing campaign almost, to where I could draw some of the big wigs over to that, I don't know, website, or, I know that's a lot of work, but something, to get them going and seeing, okay, yeah, she's good.
Yeah. I would definitely, thinking about your networking, you may also want to consider your LinkedIn, using LinkedIn as a thought leadership platform. If there are things that you do in the world where you can talk about best practices in your profession, in your lane, even in your community, LinkedIn's a great way to do that because you can do blog posts and then you start to get known and have a reputation around certain subject matter expertise areas. And then some people can notice you that way too.
Well, that's a great idea. Thank you.
Yeah. Cool.
I'll add one more thing about networking, and Shira and I talk about this a lot also, is your network opens the door to the hidden job market.
Yes. Yes.
And as Shira said, if earlier, I mean, you apply online and it's really a crapshoot, because people now Shira said 100, 200 resumes within, the first couple of hours. A while back, an HR executive posted on a LinkedIn post, they got 1,500 resumes within 24 hours of posting a job.
Yeah.
Now, what are your chances out of 1,500 resumes being even getting your resume looked at? And the hidden job market is just the fact that there's a lot of jobs that are not posted on the internet anywhere. And the only way you find out about these opportunities is through your network.
Over
So,
80%, over 80% of jobs are hidden from the market, meaning
yeah.
over 80% of jobs are not on the job boards. Do you hear that? Over 80% of jobs are not on the job boards. And the reason is that employers don't want to go through the hundreds, 1,500 resumes. They want to go in their hidden network, talk to their colleagues and say, who do you know? Right? That's just kind of the way that it goes. And so you need to be networking with people so that people know what you do, who you do it for, what you're looking for, so they can refer you.
Yeah, because that's what we do at our agency. Hey, do you know a good fit for this
Right.
particular
That's right.
position? You know, and like you said, the
That's right.
person vouches for them because they work there.
That's right.
And that's how they get their resume.
And then when they
Yeah.
post the job on USA Jobs or whatever, they're doing it just to check a box. Like, yeah, okay, we're supposed to post the job. But really, so they know Susie, Fred, Ashley, and Mary who could actually be the right fit. And those are the people who are going to get extra consideration.
Yep.
Yep. It's all about relationships, right? People hire people. They don't hire resumes. They want a relationship. They want someone to trust, that they trust, to say, Gina's a great fit. Rebecca, Monique's a great fit. Syl's a great fit for this. You need to consider her for this. All right. Any other last questions before we wrap up? All right. So I'm going to put in a couple of links into the search bar. One of them is a link to videos that I have, including accessing the hidden job market, which Vern was alluding to. You're welcome to any of these videos. And the other thing I'll put in there is the link to this page that has videos from this call. And I just noticed that I am very delayed in posting our recent videos. I'm going to be doing that after this call. So go ahead and take and avail yourself of that. That's where the videos are for this call since August of 2020. Okay. But again, I will be shortly putting up our last quarter, which I've been delayed in doing. And you're welcome to any of those. And if you'd like to reach out to me or Vern specifically, Vern, if you'd like to put your information in the chat.
Yeah, I put my email address in the chat.
Great. And I'll put mine here as well. And if you guys would like to reach out to us, we Vern and I both offer short complimentary calls if you just have some extra questions. And obviously, if you'd like to explore working with either one of us, you're welcome to do that as well. All right, great. So I'm going to go ahead and formally end this part of the call. And then for anyone who would like to stay on for a little bit, I offer a short prayer call for encouragement. All right, so we'll end the call and feel free to keep joining us anytime you'd like. We meet every other Friday from 9:15 to 10:15 Eastern. Feel free to invite your colleagues. Okay, have a blessed day, everyone.